Now recently we've been exploring concepts relating to our human condition here on Earth and how that relates to the wider society and the way that society appears to be going at the moment. And that discussion has by necessity included this idea of a ruling elite which is somehow supposed to guide humanity for better or for worse. And this elite is sometimes, or what they stand for, is sometimes loosely referred to as the New World Order. Today we're going to be speaking to someone who has an interesting, an unusual and perhaps a controversial view on the New World Order. Quote, "The New World Order is good for you." Now, unless I'm very much mistaken, that can only be described as quite a claim. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Terry Boardman. Hi Terry.
Hi, Greg.
Thanks for joining us today. You too. Now at the moment in society, generally in society, there seems to be a build-up of resentment toward what is sometimes perceived, even if people have no concept of a global elite or a ruling elite, or that they're not interested in anything like that really, but there still seems to be this resentment towards a financial elite. You know, we've seen all the problems with the bankers and the subprime mortgage, and these people are blamed for that. And people are starting, if nothing else, people are starting to realise that what's going on isn't necessarily in their benefit. Mm-hmm. So for someone like yourself to come along and then say to people, the New World Order is good for you, that's going to grate with some people, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I mean, how do you feel about with that standpoint?
Well, when I'm saying the New World Order is good for you, it's not in any sense of approving of it, but rather from the point of view that the New World Order is, as it were, necessary to provide the resistance for us to grow. So if we want to try to become free as individuals and as modern humanity, that happens within a context of resistance. We need something to grow against. Yeah? And at the moment it's global, because humanity is growing globally, so to speak. Yeah? And the New World Order functions as that resistance against which we grow and find ourselves spiritually.
We don't need, surely we don't need evil to be right in front of our faces to know that it exists.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that evil is right in front of the faces of many of us. Yeah, many people have experienced it very, very directly. And other people, as also I'm sure you know, would even question whether evil does exist. And we're often told by the media that evil doesn't exist anymore. We're too adult and grown up for that. That's a medieval superstition.
Yeah.
But I think more and more people are realising that that is not the case.
We can only judge other people by their actions, because we don't know what their intentions are.
Yeah.
But it would appear that the intentions of the New World Order, depending on who you listen to, it doesn't look like a happy ending for humanity at the moment. But if what you're saying is right, then ultimately it will be a happy ending.
Well, Shakespeare said the play's the thing, right? And if you're going to have a play with real drama in which the characters go through growth, then the bad guys have got to be really bad in order to provide the maximum tension and therefore the maximum catharsis and the maximum growth of the characters in the play. Yeah? Yeah. And while not wishing to trivialise human evolution as a play, I think it's something of this nature.
Any story's got to have a bad guy, isn't it?
Well, to provide the drama, as I think, either it's got a so-called a bad guy, or something within the character of the leading character, yeah, which provides that person with his or her own resistance, inner resistance.
Now, some people say that the New World Order, this kind of thing, it's all about money, and then some people say, oh, it's got nothing to do with money. It's all about control.
Yeah.
You're actually going a step further and saying, well, no, it's about spiritual development.
Yeah.
It's about a level above that. But let's just look at how, I mean, that's quite a big step for some people. That's quite a big step for some people, even though I can see where you're coming from. But just that aside for the time being, let's look at, as far as you're concerned, what they're actually doing at the moment, because if you're accepting that they are evil, ultimately they may be good for us, but we've still got to oppose them here and now, haven't we? And we've still got to fight against them here and now.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so with that in mind, then really the people that are against the New World Order then are on the right track.
Well, they are, as I said, they're only on the right track insofar as they're playing their part within the drama. Yeah, as I see it, what their goal is to turn this entire planet and humanity into, if you will, a machine, a bit like the Death Star in the Star Wars movie. So this entire planet would become, in effect, one giant machine, and we would become cyborgs. We would no longer be human beings. Yeah, we would become some sort of species of robot, and
completely subservient then.
Well, because there would be no freedom, right? The physicists are now trying to tell us that our consciousness either doesn't exist, or our consciousness is just a matter of electromagnetic frequencies and vibrations, which can then be controlled. And if they can be controlled and calculated, well, freedom's gone. Yeah, it's gone out the window. So once you go down that route, as they're trying to do now, then that's the next step, is then to say, well, we can be completely controlled in everything we do.
And this would also fit in with the microchipping agenda and the vaccination agenda. So basically what we're saying is then humanity is in danger of being completely enslaved by I mean, Star Wars is a good analogy, really, by a totally evil system. And really, I mean, in Star Wars it does come out like that, doesn't it? Where you've got to stand up and fight against these people, and you've got to stand up and say no more. And the problem at the moment is that people really aren't doing that, are they?
Well, I don't know here. You see, you say you've got to stand up and fight against these people, but that was an American movie in an American context. And of course, in American movies, you've got to stand up and fight against these people.
Oh, we don't necessarily mean fight in as much as a physical fight.
Right.
It's as much as a fight to not accept their way of doing things.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And to, I mean, people talk about this a lot, don't they? You know, it's the struggle is really within yourself then.
Yeah.
To not accept, to not go down the route, or the route, as they say in America, that these people are taking.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that do accept all these things and do allow themselves to be manipulated by the New World Order.
If you, it's a bit like martial arts. Yeah. If you hate your enemy, you're going to lose against him. So once you go down the road of hatred, whatever the New World Order get up to, if you start hating them, you've already lost. So we need to understand that, and unfortunately, in those people who are seeking to do their best to try to combat the New World Order, they sometimes give way to hatred, and that is the road to defeat, I would say. Yeah,
but on the other side of that, what about these people in the New Age movement who are saying, "Let's love the New World Order"? Because to me, that neutralises them then.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And when I said, you know, you quoted me as saying the New World Order is good for you, I certainly don't mean in the sense of loving them. It's just that it's a bit like an unpleasant medicine that one has to take in the course of one's evolution to grow against. Yeah, it's that resistance we need to grow. Yeah. And that's certainly not a question of loving them or approving of what they're doing, not at all.
Maybe it's a bit like a kick up the arse then, really, for humanity to say, look, get yourself in order.
Because over the centuries we have become spiritually pretty sleepy, and only since approximately the 15th century, the time of the Renaissance, we are slowly starting as individuals to wake up. But because we are spiritually pretty sleepy and we're so fixed on this material world, that's why we do need this. This kick you mentioned. Yeah.
And then maybe we start to get on a spiritual path, and we see the connectedness of all things, and we see how our life maybe is much more than the five senses. But we can perhaps get into that. Yeah. Let's just going back. Let's just look at what the New World Order. If we're going to oppose them, obviously, but let's just look at some of the things that they're doing. Now you've gone through. There's 4 things we've got here, 4 sort of programs that they're doing at the moment. If we start with they're suppressing the Latin element, now what's that all about?
Right. Well, this takes us into different periods of history, so I'll try and keep it very brief. Yeah. That as you know, there was, for example, in the West there was the Greco-Roman element, and everything came out of the Greco-Roman culture, the Roman period. Yeah. That element is particularly connected with politics. The development of political thinking and military thinking, diplomatic thinking, intellectual thinking. And that's an element which in a sense came to an end in the 15th century, but is still carrying on in a sense. Yeah? And of course the Catholic Church and the Vatican are very much connected to that. So the New World Order, which is an Anglo-American run enterprise largely, they are seeking to, out of their knowledge of the way history is developing, they're seeking to push all of those remaining elements from that previous epoch and in effect put them to sleep. So they no longer have an effect.
You say Anglo-American, but as far as I can see, the outlook for Britain, the outlook for America, I mean, it doesn't look good, and that's putting it mildly. It doesn't look good economically. It doesn't look good. If we just look at purely, you know, we're not going off into any spiritual, just purely politically, it doesn't look good.
Well, you mean just the economic situation?
I mean the social situation, the economic situation. When I just look around myself in England today, you know, we're talking about British society. So it doesn't look good from the point of view of the British economy at the moment. You know, the general society of Britain and America. You know, a lot of people are saying that the next sort of superpowers are going to be Russia and China. This is just purely from a political point of view. What would you say to that?
I would say that basically the Russians and the Chinese in the present time don't have any of the new ideas. They have, the Chinese in particular, they have energy because they have a population, as it was in our case, which is just coming out of the countryside full of forces, comes into the cities, powers the society with its own industrial revolution, and that goes on for a couple of generations before it starts to peter out. But the new ideas, I don't see any real evidence that new ideas, economic ideas, political ideas, even technological ideas, are coming from China. They're basically copying what we are giving them. And I don't say that in any approving way. It's then a question of what kind of ideas are we giving them. So I feel that the momentum or the drive will continue to come from the Anglo-American West for quite some time.
So even though they're really, so it's more about them trying to control the population and to turn them into this slave race, but they still want to remain control over the globe, because a lot of people say, no, they'll collapse America and they'll collapse Britain, but you're saying that's not the case.
No, because I'm saying that in this particular epoch of time, that the centre of the New World Order is within the English-speaking world, and it's driven from the English-speaking world.
And that is likely to continue, you think?
That's likely to continue for quite some time, certainly through this century, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And if you look, for example, at the writings of Zbigniew Brzezinski, he's very clear in his book, for example, best example is the Grand Chessboard, He's very clear there that although on the surface it seems like he's saying, well, you know, we have to open up to all the nations, he's very clearly pointing to the fact that the US has to stay in control.
And I suppose then, in that respect, they would block anyone who sought to try to gain control. I mean, excuse me, Germany's a very good example of this. After the Second World War, I think they made Germany, this is the only country that had to do it, they made Germany put Made in Germany on the products and no one would buy them apparently. Of course it backfired because the products were really good and everyone bought them. But, you know, they've been blocked culturally, haven't they? If you think of all the great philosophers and the music.
Yeah, the Germans, they just want the Germans to be the manufacturers of good motor cars and perhaps good football teams, you know. So the Germans can basically serve us and provide us with entertainment through sport, for example. And as you say, not make a cultural contribution. That's what they don't want the Germans to provide. But I mean, I've gained a lot from the writings and work of Rudolf Steiner, who was working out of the German-speaking area. He was Austrian background mostly, but and there was a tremendous contribution of all kinds, particularly in the social area and spiritual area. And they don't want these new ideas to come forward. They want all the ideas to come from the Anglo-American.
And the same with Russia, perhaps as well. Then and do you think that's the same with the East? Maybe what's going on in in Iran, Iraq, and that kind of thing, is that a cultural thing also, or?
Well, Iran. That's a whole bigger question, isn't it? Because there's a whole question of the Anglo-American relationship with Israel, and Israel are very concerned about Iran, as you know. And then Iran's geopolitical situation in a very strategic position, right, in southern Central Asia. So that's I think a somewhat different question, why they're so keen to gain control of Iran. But basically any culture, it was there already in The Clash of Civilizations by Huntington, you know, that book, which is coming right out of the depths of the New World Order. Any culture which really makes a stand against Anglo-American domination will be, well, dealt a blow, shall we say, yes, and put in its place. So that's their agenda.
Now, the elite have managed somehow to get into this position of unrivaled power, certainly over the nations of America and Britain, and continuing over Europe, and any nation, like you say, that stands up against them, somewhere like Iran, and apparently Saddam Hussein was, you know, wanting to dump the dollar and take rid of
Venezuela,
kind of well, Venezuela is another example, just gets trashed, basically. Now, there's a lot of different different theories of how they've managed to get to this sort of level of power. One of them is that certainly people like the Rothschilds and these kind of people have been involved in, I don't want to say black magic, but demonology, have been involved in somehow harnessing other dimensional entities to work with them or work for them. Do you think that's feasible, or...?
Yeah, I think that's certainly feasible. I mean, I can't speak specifically about the Rothschilds, but if we know that for a number of centuries now, occult knowledge has been there in the Western world, particularly on the fringes of Freemasonry, for example, which is not to say all Freemasons are dabbling in this stuff, because most of them aren't interested in it. Yeah? But on the fringes of certain aspects of Freemasonry, people do go into aspects of ceremonial magic where they do attempt to contact other entities, on planes other than the physical, and also to make contact with members of theirs who are dead, who have crossed over the threshold, who they can then stay in touch with and use their energies
and their knowledge,
and their knowledge.
And specifically, I was thinking of the lower dimensional energies in terms of actual demonic sort of forces.
Well, these are often the first beings that one encounters, apparently, when you cross the threshold. These kind of entities, particularly for Western people.
And these kind of entities, I mean, you know, when people say they're quite close to the Earth, but they also apparently, you know, I don't know if feed off's the right word, but they're quite, they will be, because they're lower dimensional entities, quite interested in war and bloodshed and that kind of thing. So a lot of the rituals are blood rituals, and some people do say that the wars are almost like ritual sacrifices to this kind of magic. Do you think that's going too far, or there's a lot, you know, these kind of conflicts?
That I honestly couldn't say about that. You know, whether they are ritual blood sacrifice in themselves. How can I put it? If you take the first great blood sacrifice of the 20th century, so to speak, the First World War, I mean, there is a sense in which that war...
Not the whole thing, maybe, but that kind of idea, you know, the push towards that,
was really the karma, if you will, or the result of the materialism of the previous 200 years. That people had allowed themselves to get so bound up with nationalism, which of course has to do, in a sense, with their connection with their blood and their bodies and the land they occupy, that it was, in a sense, an inevitable result when the peoples of Europe allowed themselves to get so deeply bound up with those kind of feelings and emotions. That, and then the combination of the technology that developed.
Going back to these people who you know, are perhaps contacting these people. You know, we spoke to someone a while ago who was saying they have a Luciferian agenda.
Right. Okay.
Would you agree with that, or?
Yes and no.